Excellent. Let's get started. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for joining in today. My name is Amer Latif. I'm the VP of Sales at PresentPal. Our webinar for this month is focusing on ignoring and avoiding communication skills and exploring the impact this has on students with disabilities. Our guest speaker from Florida State College at Jacksonville, the director over there with the Disability Services, is my good friend, Edward Zirkle, who will be talking around this topic and how it's impacted at his institution. We'll get an opportunity to ask questions directly to Ed and myself, and we'll take those questions sporadically. There'll be times to take those, but in the meantime, if you do have questions to ask via the chat box, feel free to type it in. So my colleague Abby is joining me to support me on this. She will be answering those questions on the chat box. So again, there's closed captioning available on this. You can enable that at any point. This webinar is also recorded, so there will be a recording available for those who need it afterwards. Brilliant. So we will get kick-started here. And just to let everyone know, here are some contact details, which we will put on towards the end of the slides. But just, you've got a nice picture of Ed there, a so-so picture of me there, but at least you know what we look like. And those contact details we'll put afterwards too. Okay, and as I mentioned before, so we're going to really focus on the impact of avoiding public speaking classes for students on disabilities. Now, in some of your colleges, as Ed's alluded to me before in one of our conversations, students can avoid some of these classes and maybe skip them. What does that mean? Why does it happen? And what's the long-term impact of that to the student as a lifelong skill being lost? What happens when they transfer on to a university? Let's say they're a community college. What happens to that? We'll talk a little bit around that, and Ed will talk around the actual issues around anxiety and why it actually really impacts students a lot more, particularly the last couple of years that a lot of our students and our faculty have gone through, where there's been quite a lot of turmoil in terms of remote learning and hybrid learning, and now back to classroom, face-to-face classrooms learning. So that I can imagine a lot of stress that some of you have experienced in your semesters. So time permitting, we will also get a chance to look at PresentPal and how the tool can help alleviate some of those anxiety concerns for those students and actually look to improve confidence with public speaking. So there'll be a chance for everyone to look at that. I will also talk briefly about our pilot program. So if you have questions beyond this about the pilot program, please do get in touch with me. My colleague Samantha will come on at that point and talk a little bit more about the pilot program and how it works. Okay, so let's get started off with a nice friendly poll. All right, you'll see this on your screens now. And the question really is, what is the impact of students avoiding public speaking classes? So you can select multiple options here. You've got increased anxiety, lack of preparation, less opportunities, lack of experience, enabling avoidance. The enabling avoidance one is basically, is this something that is now being inbred into the students whereby they can actually now feel that they can avoid a public speaking class later on in life too, or where public speaking is required. Okay, letting the options run through. Some more people coming in. Okay, we'll end the poll and share the results with you guys. Ed, we'll have a little bit of conversation around this, actually. So what's interesting is majority of you actually selected lack of experience as an impact that ends up here, but pretty much evenly across the board. All the other options were selected too: enabling avoidance, increased anxiety, lack of preparation, less opportunity. So there's almost common consensus with all of those having an impact. This is where, Ed, I wanted to kind of pick your brain a bit before we get started in your webinar on your presentation slide. So I think what would be good is to elaborate on the story you exchanged with me in terms of what happens, you know, when we first discussed this problem, what you found was a problem, what happened like with students who had to take public speaking classes, but then you had a lot of requests coming in of trying to skip these classes, or can I not take this class because I've got some issues with anxiety or anything like that. So if you could just tell everyone about that a little bit.
Okay, yeah, and this is a subject that's kind of near and dear to me because I was one of these students at one time. I had a huge fear of speaking, especially in public. Even sometimes when just it was just two or three people, I'd have that fear. So, um, and I've been in higher education now a little over 10 years, mainly in disability services. So many times I've seen documentation that come across my desk talking about communication issues for students. So doing presentations, and so one of my biggest things is why why do students have problems with communication? And one of the things when I first took over position here, because I've only been here since March here at Florida State College at Jacksonville, and a couple of my student support coordinators who are basically disability coordinators were bringing up some issues about um, students doing course substitutions. And I was asking them, why are we having so many course substitutions, especially in the communication? You get it all the time, whether it's math or English and writing, but the communication is one that I think that we really need to look at a little bit more, because I think this is an important aspect that will affect students, especially because most of your students that will graduate, they're going to move into some employment or into the workforce, and they may need those skills. They may not see it immediately, but you never know. 2, 3 years down the road, they might get um, promoted, and all of a sudden they're in charge of people. So that communication skill is something that's vital, and I think sometimes students don't understand that area when it comes to uh, presenting and doing public speaking. So I've worked with my dean of communications, and we had a lot of conversations about this and how we could overcome some of these course substitutions and really get these students to understand that we're trying to teach them a skill that will be vital to them in the future.
Okay, so what was interesting when we spoke, the other thing that you mentioned to me was a lot of students from your college end up transferring into, or a significant percentage transfer into universities also.
Correct.
Now, what the impact of that? Let's say students avoided these public speaking classes. The impact of that then going into university environment. What happens there, or what are some of the challenges you've come across?
Well, what you see is when students transfer is they don't have that particular set of skills. And as you move up, and everybody knows in higher education, as you move up, almost at one point you'll be asked to make some kind of presentation, whether it's by yourself or whether it was work with a group. And when students don't have that particular skill set, then it becomes a problem, and it kind of builds, just gets worse and worse for the students. So trying to eliminate that as early as possible, when they're freshmen and sophomores, when they do go into their junior and senior years at the higher college level, we're hoping to be able to give them those skills so they can also be successful in that classroom environment.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you mentioned is also that there's some students obviously will maybe go into the workforce. Now, this is a lifelong skill, and that has an effect afterwards too. So when we're talking equity, and I know that's a word that's being it's very topical right now. It's out there as an equitable experience for learning. A lot of these students end up missing out, particularly if they're given the opportunity. Yes, you can skip. Yes, you can skip that learning experience because you've requested it. With a student that's just coming in, let's say a freshman just coming in from high school, maybe not aware the long-term impact of skipping that particular skill set.
Right.
Yeah.
And as I was talking, I had a couple conversations with my dean of communications, and I should have added this to the slides, but I didn't. But I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about it now, because this will. Why do students need the fundamentals of public speaking, I asked him. And one of the interesting things that he said, students, they're required to know a certain level of math. They're required to know a certain level of writing and, reading. And he said, that's my responsibility, is the communication part. So when we have students who try to avoid the public speaking, and one of the things he said that was interesting, like, they don't have to do an actual public speaking thing in the course, just because they take this course, that doesn't mean they actually have to do it, because there's different methods. I know a lot of times we'll put in our accommodation letters, maybe do a one-on-one presentation with the instructor, maybe do a recording, a video of themselves. And so I was asking him, so why are you, adamant about trying to get students to take public speaking? And so I'm reading this off my notes here. And one of the things he said, well, we want to teach them the principles and procedures that promote effective communication. We want to teach them about message composition involving ideas and information acquisition, which I thought was great. And then we want to teach them how to determine a purpose and analysis of an audience. And of course, he's really good at all this, telling me all this information. So I wanted to get a little bit more in depth. And I said, well, what else are you talking about? And he was talking about, well, it's about the message transmittal involving, your vocal variations. It's about articulation and appropriate levels of language usage and listening for both literal and critical comprehensions. That's what we wanted to do to help students. We can teach them all those techniques and give them an idea of that communication process without having them do an actual presentation. But that's why I thought it was important. Well, it was a great idea when I talked to Amer. It's like, hey, I'm working for this new company now. We have this product that might be able to help students with public speaking and doing presentations. And I think that's definitely something that's down my alley. It's something I'm really wanting to promote.
Yeah, the oral communication is an interesting one, Ed, because I know in one of our previous webinars, we did talk about different types of oral communications. So the common misconception is that presentation is just about, the typical Google Slides or PowerPoint, and you have that, and you're presenting with using that, right? But oral communications goes beyond that. We're talking oral communications could be a speech, or it could be me talking in a group environment, in a classroom environment, or myself actually in an interview. That's the other element where it becomes interesting, where that anxiety could actually overcome your confidence. Exactly. So interesting. We could talk about this all day, but I know we've got some slides to go through. So on that note, I will pass it over to you, Ed, your slides.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm going to use myself as the example, because when I graduated high school, I did not have that skill set of doing presentations. I mean, literally, and we're talking about anxiety disorder. So what is an anxiety disorder? Well, of course, you can see there it's a mental health condition which causes humans to respond to certain things or events with fear and dread. Now, all this information, I just want to let everybody know, I took this from the Mayo Clinic, because we work with them quite a bit. We have a lot of students that go over to the Mayo Clinic here in Jacksonville. So a lot of this information I got from their website. But a lot of times what we see here, there's physical symptoms and signs that we see quite a bit. And this was exactly what happened to me. You see fatigue, trouble sleeping, muscle tension or aches, trembling, which I had absolutely, easily startled, sweating, nausea. And then as you can see, it kind of gets a little bit more in depth with diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome, and irritability. So, but one thing I've learned too, that every human has some form of nervousness or anxiety at some point, and this can be caused by work, school, relationships, making important decisions, stuff like that. And one thing I learned too from speaking to some of the professionals is anxiety doesn't go away. It's going to be there. It can get worse over time. And I'm just going to drop down to the bottom piece there, that it can lead to other disorders such as phobias, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, as we call it, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, depression, substance abuse, and of course, we never want to think about the other, but it could cause suicidal thoughts or suicide. So we really want to try to fix it. So, we want to get a better handle on it, and we want students to learn how to get a better handle on it. Amir, if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so, these are some of the student issues that we sometimes see. Persistent worrying or anxiety, overthinking plans and solutions. I'm not going to read them all. I'm just going to kind of go over very lightly. Perceiving situations and events, difficulty handling uncertainty, indecisiveness, and inability to relax. And this was a lot of the stuff that I'm reading was exactly what I was going through when I was younger. And I spent most of my younger adult life in the military. And in the military, you kind of have to be able to relate to people, give instructions, and sometimes as you move up in ranks, you have to give presentations, and you're always training. So these were skills I didn't have, and I needed to learn how to be overcome these skills. And with that bottom there, I've done presentations, and all of a sudden, my mind goes blank, and that's one of the most horrifying experiences when you're doing a presentation or talking to a group of people and your mind goes blank. And that used to happen to me quite a bit. Can you go to the next slide there, Amir? So how do we address anxiety in college? And this is, again, like I said, this was taken from the Mayo website, but it definitely talks about exactly why we're here today, talking about these issues. So a lot of times in Mayo, people are saying, well, get help early. And so what does that mean? It means students need to talk with advisors. They need to talk to counselors, faculty members, or support services like what I have here, and use different types of techniques and tools. For example, like Present Pal, that's why I'm pretty excited about it. Sometimes they say maybe keeping a journal might help, helps with time management and dealing with your anxiety. And then how to prioritize issues in your life, whether it's your home life, your school, work, relations. Anxiety is always going to be there, like I said. And so we're always, in education, we want students to be successful. That's what it's really all about. That's why a lot of us in this industry, that's what we want to see, because that's what we want students to be able to be successful. Because if they're being successful, then we're being successful. And so when you have a student who comes in and will tell my coordinators, I can't do public speaking, I can't do it because I have all these different types of issues, disability. And so I have, again, I use myself because, I'm not afraid to tell people I have ADHD, I have PTSD. So, but I learned to overcome these with a lot of help from a lot of people. And I think that this is where Present Pal can definitely help people overcome this. I think it will reduce some of the course substitutions that we see in higher education, and that will be beneficial for students because we want them to have those tools to use in their everyday lives, and especially when they graduate and go into the workforce.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ed. And we're going to continue onwards with this conversation. But folks, this is also a great time for us, for all of you to ask any questions on the chat box. And we'll take some questions right afterwards. But before we do that, everyone's favorite thing, we're going to launch a poll. So right in front of your screens, you should see a poll come up. And the question on this one is, we've looked at the problem, right? So now what we're looking at is what else can we do as administrators, as educators, as faculty to support students with public speaking anxiety. So you've got all the options there. You can select multiples, academic support, one-to-one tutoring, public speaking, content or resources, ed tech tools, peer support groups. Feel free on the chat box also to type in what your institution is doing at the moment, if anything at all. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying actually our institution is not doing anything with regards to this, because you won't be alone. What we found out, as we'll touch on later on, that This may be a problem that is kind of like a blind spot for a lot of institutions where it's not come up quite a lot, or maybe there's anxiety about talking about this.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I'm just going to share the results so everyone can see. And the big majority was one-to-one tutoring. If you're able to afford that at your institution and able to provide that support and you have the resources, absolutely brilliant resource to give students that coaching, that one-to-one support is amazing. But the key word there is resources, right? So for a lot of institutions like community colleges, let's say, you may be limited on those resources. So what else can we do? So some of you have also put down that there's peer support groups, academic support, public speaking content, or resources, right? So you have those elements in there too. The lowest section was on EdTech tools. Now, it sounds like it's a great transition into PresentPal, and it is, but we won't do that just as yet, because I want to talk to Ed a little bit more about this. So 1 second, Ed, I'm just going to move on to the next slide, which is really—
I think one thing, Amer, one thing I'd like to say is with what you're asking the people out there, it's about building confidence. I think that is the one word that I haven't really used just yet, but if we can teach students to build that confidence and give them those skills, then they will be successful. And I think that's what, why we do some of the things we do with the one-on-one, using different types of assistive technologies. We want to build that confidence. And I think that's the biggest key, is to give them that support and resources to build that confidence and give them those skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think when I talk about what the background, the story of why PresentPal was created, and I'll share the story of the founder of the software, the creator of the software. You will see it came out of a need. It came out of a problem and a pain that he was experiencing himself at university. And the university, which is a well-known university in the UK, did not have any ed tech support or any other support aside from that. So you'll see some commonalities with what Ed has just shared in terms of what options were given to Chris at that point. But before I do that, let's see if there are a couple of questions. Abby, are you able to pick out a couple of questions or any questions that you're seeing on the chat box? And if you could read them out to us, that would be great.
Hi, Amir. So it's not so much questions. It's just people kind of, our audience talking about kind of what they've seen. So one of the audience members has said that the institution in which they teach isn't actually addressing the ways in which student anxiety affects public speaking and peers in public speaking classes, which is a really interesting point.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what I'd be curious about, thank you for putting that comment down, is my question back to you is, what impact have you noticed from that when that's not being provided? So have you seen any impact with regards to the students, or any sort of issues or an increase in certain anxiety reporting? I'm curious about that side of it. So please do share that if you can on the chat box too. That'd be brilliant.
And then another member of the audience has said that at their institution, they've worked to provide an incremental approach to speaking in public. So speaking in front of 1 or 2 people, or a video speech, and then share with the instructor, and ultimately working up to speak in front of a class or perhaps half the class.
That's brilliant, actually. So that's actually allows almost like a step-by-step broken down approach. So that's pretty good. I'd be curious to see what the results are from that too. How they found the students responding to that prior to, utilizing that sort of method. But that's interesting. Ed, have you come across that yourself?
Oh yeah, quite a bit. And a lot of times when I talk to the different instructors and I talk to different students, they just tell me, they get frustrated sometimes. They want to be successful, but they don't know how to be successful sometimes. And it just takes that 1 or 2 things that could get them over that hump and give them like I said, give them those skills. You don't have to be a professional speaker. I mean, there's only quite a few people in the whole world that are professional speakers. I mean, For me, I don't consider myself a professional speaker. I can do presentations, I can talk to a group of people, but I had to learn those skills. So, and like I said, I was a student once, and I used to get frustrated and I would get nervous and my hands would shake. So again, it goes back to, how do we give them that confidence? Well, step by step. You can't just take one step and jump over another step. Like climb a thing of stairs. If I want to get to the top, I have to take every step to get to the top. So if you think of it that way, when it comes to students learning these skills, we have to sometimes break it down into step by step.
I was just skimming through, Ed, as you're talking, some of the comments and ideas others have suggested. There's some brilliant ones in there. So thank you, everyone, for sharing those. And again, if you have any questions for Ed or myself, please do type it in the chat box. So we'll move on. This is your opportunity to see PresentPal. If you've not seen it before, this is great for you to take a glimpse of how this product works and for which type of student it could work. So before I do that, I did promise this. I said I will tell you exactly why it was created. So this is Chris. This is the founder of the company. Chris, when he was going to university, had to present as part of his coursework, as graded coursework, 2 or 3 times per week. Now, Chris from an early age was diagnosed with dyslexia. So this was something that Chris knew he is going to have anxiety about, struggled performing on it, and then approached Disability Service and said, okay, look, this is something I'm going to struggle with. I try to use flashcards, but I can't read my own handwriting. So what can I do? What can you offer me? Now, Ed, this is where it's interesting, because the options given to Chris at this time were you can skip the presentations altogether, or you can actually have more time. Now, skipping the presentations, again, I go back to the point, because Chris was going to business school and had some lofty ambitions in terms of, obviously, he started his own business now and wanted to not miss out on a key skill set, particularly around communication.
Exactly.
So didn't feel that was an equitable solution. Then looked at, okay, if I have more time, will that help? And what he found out, and actually it built up. If anyone's seen that before or experienced that, it usually ends up adding or building to a crescendo. So all you're doing is you're pushing that anxiety further down the line.
Absolutely.
And that kind of triggered a passion within Chris to say, look, am I the only one? Surely others have experienced this. And before creating PresentPal, we wanted to explore the problem further and looked at some of the things that why our presentation is challenging for most people. And it came to a lot of these issues that you can see on your screen here. So anxiety, as Ed mentioned before, is a big one. The other aspect, Ed, you mentioned also working memory challenges, your mind going blank and forgetting, which is a big nightmare for anyone who's had that experience. That's very tough. Executive functioning, the organization, is an interesting one, because this is one where the preparation of a presentation, the initial part, not the delivery, is what students struggle with too. So how can you help them with that? There's the visual stress. I noticed something in the comments there on the chat box where people are talking about a visual audience being very overwhelming and very challenging.
Yeah.
I agree, but here's one thing. I'm very comfortable public speaking now. Not by design, but it was just practice over the years. But over the last couple of years, doing presentations remotely on Zoom has its own type of anxiety and stress. It's the non-visual stress, as I call it, because I cannot get visual cues of, is my content getting through? So that can be challenging too, particularly when you're delivering a presentation to an audience you cannot visually see or experience.
What's funny, Amer, is as he's talking about visual stress, and I know everybody's heard this. Well, if you're doing a presentation, just think as your audience all naked. It's always that, think of everybody's naked. And I was like, that's not really a good idea if everybody's naked. I was like, that would make it would have made my presentation even worse, because I would be thinking of something else other than the subject I'm on.
Yeah, it didn't work for me.
Yeah, me neither.
I was like, no. It may, that way I'm not ruling it out. If it's worked for some people, please do share on the chat box if that's worked for you. But the other interesting thing is we're working with a lot of students with maybe some speech issues and confidence issues with regards to their own speech. And that's something that having a tool that allows them to build their confidence slowly with their own speech can be useful. All of this leads to that high cognitive overload where you've got all these things happening in the back of your head, and you're thinking at the end of the day, is this presentation graded? That's the final kicker is, okay, well, this is going to have an impact on my grades. Great. Just as if I didn't need any more stress. So you can imagine from a student's point of view, how difficult that could be.
Yeah.
But those of us in the work environment, we experience all this too. At a different level. So it's interesting that a lot of these pains that students are experiencing are pains that some of us are also experiencing right now with regards to oral communication. As Ed says, or said, the anxiety doesn't go away. It's always there with you. Right?
Well, one of my best friends I served in the Army with, he has a speech impediment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for him, when I trained him to become a sergeant in the Army, for him to get to the level where he was able to train and speak to other soldiers, he had to get over that speech impediment. It never went away. It's part of his disability. And so, you know, again, just working with him and just taking the time to teach him some of these skills, he overcame it. It was hard for him, but he overcame it. So, you know, there are challenges, and there are students out there and lots of people who have this challenge, but again, it can be overcome.
Yeah, and the keywords there are time, commitment, resource, and hopefully the luxury of technology can assist all of those things. Right. Because some of those commodities, a lot of us are not, you know, privileged enough to have, maybe.
Exactly.
So all of that led Chris, all those problems, to validate and then say, you know what, need to create a tool, and went out and created PresentPal. What you're seeing in front of you is the app itself, and this is the latest version of the app that you're seeing. Obviously, it went to a few iterations, and it works on all smartphones, so iPhone or Android devices, tablets, and it's designed so it's very intuitive. So students literally can pick it up, and within a short period of time of using it, can actually become very proficient at it. So it's not one of those complex softwares that takes ages to learn and actually ends up causing more anxiety than what it's supposed to do. So how it works, you'll get a brief glimpse of this. My colleague later on is going to talk about how you can actually book a proper live demo with her for yourself and your colleagues. So I'll, when Samantha comes on, then you'll get to hear from her how you can do that. So how this works, what it does is it allows you to create accessible interactive flashcards that do quite a lot more. And what does this mean? We've all used, or some of us have used, the old-fashioned flashcards where we've had to write bullet points to assist us on the topic we're talking around. So let's say slide 1, I'll have my flashcard with my 4 bullet points. By having it on a digital format like this and having it accessible, I'm able to have it displayed in any font I want. So Open Dyslexic font, for example, and in any size I want, and any color overlay. So for those VI users, it becomes very useful too. And it also has a magnified screen roll. So what it allows me to do is, let's say I'm distracted during a presentation, I can quickly scan down, I can look at it, and it'll tell me exactly the topic I'm talking around. That happens quite a lot. So for those of us who've done the presentation, someone will ask you a question during an audience, and then you forget the exact point you were talking about during that presentation. So that's step 1. You create your digital flashcards. Okay, what does it do beyond that? We also added safety nets. So first you heard me talk about bullet points. Safety nets are additional pieces of information like images, as you're seeing here, or additional text. This is there for you if you need it. So the images are great because sometimes you may be able to describe an image better than words. So you may have that in your safety net. Or in case I'm going through a lot of metrics, a lot of data, I have it in my safety net. In case I forget, it's there for me if I need it. If I don't need it, I can continue onwards with my bullet points as my guide. So to describe to you guys how I'm using it, for example, today. So right now, on the right side of me, I've got my app, and I'm scrolling through it at the same time as I'm looking at the slides. And on the app, I've got my bullet points that I want to cover on each slide. So for example, on this slide, I've got 3 bullet points that I wanted to cover, which I've done so already. As I've done so, I can move on to the next slide. And this becomes handy because now once I've created my flashcards, the next step comes into, okay, I want to become comfortable with this material. I want to practice this. So as some of us have done, maybe we practice in front of a mirror, or we talk to ourselves, or maybe we have someone else we can practice our presentation with. This tool allows you to do so. We have a rehearsal mode in here, which records your audio. So as you're in rehearsal mode, you'll use your flashcards, do your presentation as if you're in real time, listen to your recording back, and then you can grade yourself. It's a self-assessment piece, so no one else is doing it. You can actually grade yourself and say, I'm happy with my content, maybe my timing could be improved, my speech was good, and I can grade myself on each flashcard. Then eventually, I'll come to a point where I'll say, you know what, flashcard 1, 3, 5 were brilliant, but 2, 4, 6, I could probably improve. And that's the slow scaffolding approach. Someone earlier had suggested that, we have them deliver a presentation to one person, then maybe 2 people, and slowly, step by step, increase that confidence. This is using that sort of strategy also because you're using a scaffolding approach to improve confidence. And what it does also, the rehearsal mode, is shows the student that graphic, as you can see on the screen here, how their confidence has improved over time on maybe timing. And one thing I wanted to talk about is we wanted to enhance this a little bit more. So for those of us who use presentations, let's say with PowerPoint or Google Slides, we now have the app integrating with both. So what exactly does that mean? What does the integration mean? Well, for one, you can create your notes now on the app and Google Slides or PowerPoint themselves, and they'll sync with each other. So that way you can work on the one platform, you have your slides in front of you, and you can create your notes. The app integration works perfectly that way. The other brilliant thing, which I think comes in very handy, is I can now control the slides using the app. So remember when I'm delivering the presentation, like I'm doing so right now, I can do one of 2 things. I can change the slides by the keyboard, the mouse, or now because of the integration, as I go to the next slide, it'll automatically change the slide on the PowerPoint. So that becomes in very handy. So when we set administrators up with the app, there's a full detailed training process that we have, a very good platform that we've developed that allows administrators to pick up on this and really understand it in a simple manner so they can deliver the training to the students. So it's designed so that the integration and everything else is very easy to do, pretty much in a couple of clicks. Okay, so I promised you Samantha. You're probably tired of my voice right now. So I am going to bring over Samantha, my colleague, who's going to talk about, I hinted this before, our pilot program. This is for spring semester 2022. So to allow institutions to maybe have enough time to maybe get ready for this. So Samantha, if you want to come on and tell everyone about the pilot program, how it works.
Hi, yes, thanks, Amir, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Very excited to have you here. So as Amir mentioned, we at PresentPal are offering a number of institutions the opportunity to pilot this completely free for the whole of your spring semester. Now, what that would mean for you is 25 licenses for you to assign to your students, in which we would give you all the support and training you would need using a dedicated account manager. Now, with that, it's a great opportunity for your department, for your students to completely test drive the app and see exactly where it's working and seeing your student confidence grow. All that we generally ask during the pilot process is 2 weeks prior to your semester start date, is that we've got everything set up and in place, and obviously your training has been conducted. Amir, if you can just move over to the next slide for me, that'd be great, please. So just to talk a little bit about a previous case study that we have done. So Jennifer Murchison on the screen here is the Assistant Director for Disability Services at the University of Memphis. And Jennifer really wanted to help support her students with anxiety, with presentations and oral communications. So with that in mind, we implemented the pilot there and supported Jennifer through the whole process, including training students on the app and staff and administrators on the app as well. Amir, if you can go to the next slide for me, please. And here, as you can see, and again, we would be happy to share this with you. We have the case study if you want to have a look into that into more detail. But from feedback that we had and from looking at the students and their progression, student confidence actually grew by 66%, which is amazing. So yeah, take up the opportunity to join us on this pilot program. What we'd like to do is possibly invite you to a demonstration with myself via Zoom, where I can go into a more in-depth demonstration of the app, showing you its features, how it works. And as Amir said, there are other ways as well that PresentPal can support your students through oral communication. Amir, I'll pass it to you for the next poll. Thank you.
You read my mind. So folks, our final poll, we're just going to launch it now. It'll pop up on your screen. And this one is more to know what you'd like to know more about. All right. So if you'd like that demo with Samantha, who you just heard, please click there. If you'd like to know more about future webinars, go ahead, click there. If you'd like to speak to Ed, go ahead, click on that, speak to myself, or you want to know about the pilot program, then click on that too. So you can click multiple options again. So let that run for a little bit. And while it's running, I just wanted to thank everyone, by the way, for participating. Ed, I want to thank you also for the great information you guys have shared. So there's some lovely anecdotes that people have shared in terms of what they're trying out at their institution, so which is brilliant. So what Samantha's going to do also is on the chat box, she'll probably put on her calendar link now. So if you're looking at the chat box, this will allow you, if you do want a demo with Samantha, where you're able to actually book directly into her calendar for yourself and your colleagues. So pretty good way for you guys to get that set up rather than having to deal with it via emails. Brilliant. Okay, so thank you for that. Thank you for your participation in this. We will be in touch with everyone who's requested more information on the demonstrations or any of the other information you've asked for. Ed, anything else you'd like to suggest?
No, thank you very much for inviting me. Again, like I said, this is kind of near and dear to me because this was a skill I really learned a lot and it has been very beneficial in my career. So I hope you all try it out because I think it will work for a lot of students. Thank you, Amir. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thanks, Ed.
Or evening on your end.
Yeah, evening here. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Hope everyone has a great day the rest of the day. And Ed, brilliant as always. I think this might be the third or fourth time we've spoken together. And amazing information as always. And I recommend anyone who does want to reach out to Ed, please utilize this man's knowledge. He has experience from a lot of state universities, a lot of private universities, and also at Florida State College now where he's at now. So a lot of experience there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, my colleagues, for helping me out. And I wish you all well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Thank you.